everything your fault?
No, it's mostly mine.
Mostly. There's a few things I can't quite accept blame for. I did not start the virus.
But you are the virus. Can you turn that down?
Okay, guys, let's go ahead and start this thing. Let's go around the room and see who everybody is. Like we got
38 people online.
Say your call sign and your name. Please go ahead, Greg.
Greg, N0EMP, with Gizmo in the foreground.
John, NK0Y.
Bob, excuse me, Bob, N0TZU.
And K0ARD. Sorry, Larry.
K6ETE.
Steve, KD0UJK.
Roger, KG0I.
Ray, W8LYJ.
Tim, WW8L.
Cliff, KE0CP.
There goes the neighborhood.
Elder Mike from Windsor, KE0LCK.
Mark, N7CTM.
CET.
KD0LSL. Area N0WIQ.
Stephen, N5GRY.
Bill, AB4TC.
Al, KE0LSL.
Dave, W0DAS.
This is Mark, K0FNL.
Ted, N0RQV, Loveland.
Eric, N6RFI.
Roy, W8MYL, Laramie.
Brad, KE0MPA, Fort Collins.
Laramie.
Good morning, everyone. Whiskey Zero, Delta Delta Zulu.
Doug, K2 Alpha Delta.
Darren, KC0ZIE.
Tony, KD0WDX.
Martin, KE0DJ.
Greg, K0GWP.
Well, it looks like it's everyone.
No, I've got Jerry here, NW0W.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Right here, John, N5WMS.
Jerry, KHGEE.
This is Rhodes and Milliken, KA0ABV.
Mike and Pierce, N0TQ.
Anyone else? I think
KE0TDQ.
Okay.
Lisa Greeley.
Anyone else?
And we'll make a request that if you're not speaking, if you could put yourself on mute so we don't pick up background noise, that makes the meeting go a lot smoother.
Okay, everybody's checked in? Sort of, kind of. Okay. Steve, did you get the chance to send out those notes, minutes, whatever?
I sent them out yesterday morning.
Oh, is that what we want? Okay, we posted all that stuff. So anything.
I didn't do the newsletter because I didn't have anything. So I didn't have the tech reporter till late last night. Plus, I didn't have your comments, so I didn't do a newsletter.
Yeah, that's fine. I've been kind of tied up, if you will, this whole week. So
yeah, that's understandable.
Darren, any report on the web? Any unusual things going on websites?
No. when I get some time, I've got a couple updates I'll want to make, but they should be relatively invisible to most folks.
Okay. Dave, Mr. DDZ, anything on the PAO?
Our views on YouTube are up. There's a lot of people that are at home watching or spending time watching YouTube. So our views have been quite high lately. We're up to 1,047 subscribers on our YouTube channel. Facebook has also been seeing some increased movements. I think we're up to around 289 people that are in our Facebook group. If you guys aren't subscribed or aren't a part of the Facebook group, please join us there. It's a great place to engage with us. That's all I have on that bit. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Appreciate that. James isn't here for interference, and Wayne isn't here, and Wayne's probably tied up. James is here?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see you. Anything on interference or?
That doesn't make me not here.
I didn't see you in the list.
Which section am I doing now?
Interference.
Okay. So if those of you, quite a few of you probably know that we've had some problems again. We don't know, we can't guarantee it's the same individual, but we suspect it probably is. I've been listening quite a bit. Quite a few people have been taunting him and threatening him and things on the repeater. And I know a lot of that's just out of frustration, but just a gentle reminder that is oftentimes illegal, and it always prolongs it and makes, that's exactly what they're looking for. So, if you can, please just do your very best to ignore it best you can. We're doing everything we can on the backside to record, report, and make sure everything we can do, we are doing to try and get that taken care of. So, couple of things with that. Number one, the jamming has been just sort of the normal mic scratching, covering up, playing music, things like that. But we've also had a couple of instances where we're hearing maybe like another repeater or some kind of RF signal on the 447-275. We actually heard one of our members caught it IDing, and I've actually been in contact with that individual. That individual is a longtime ham that's quite smart, very willing to help in any way he can. Turned off it was actually a Echolink node. We believe that it was not malicious interference by that ham, that it was more likely someone cross-banding his signal back into our repeater. So he's in touch. He's well in touch with me and willing to work with us as we go forward. I can just ask A, when you hear the malicious interference, please try your best to ignore it, and B, please pass on via the interference. I think we have a reporting link on our website. That's still there, right, Darren?
Yes, as far as I know, it's still there.
Yeah, so please use the link on the webpage to provide reports whenever you do hear it. And please try to make your reports as informational as possible. Time you heard it, if it's not immediately, if you're reporting immediately, great, I don't need that. But what repeater, and if you have the ability to listen on the input, tell me if he was strong or weak on the input. And then basically just define the interference a little bit. Was it just mic scratching? Was it, swearing? Was it playing music? Doesn't have to be long, but the more information you can include, the better for us to document. So any questions about any of that before we move on? Where on our website is the interference?
I was just looking for it. I don't see it on the front page. I will add a news item for that.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the question, and Darren for the fix.
And if it's okay, James, I'll add to this. This is K2AD.
Put your
James,
mic down a little closer to your mouth.
how about now? 1, 2, 3. Okay. This is Doug, K2AD. James and I were kind of the two that focused on the last jammer with the FCC contact. And we are back in communication with the commission. But accusing him, Tyler, of new jamming really hurts our case. The feds are taking this as kind of a new investigation. Let's collect information. We are asking them, do they feel that saying something to them of, we know who you are, really the official response that we've been told is, it's an active investigation. The Federal Communications Commission, the authorities are involved. That is all we have to say about it right now. He's definitely a little bit intimidated by the attention from the commission, but obviously the illegal drugs are taking over and pushing him to boredom and jamming. And so get us information. It's really important. What repeater you're hearing him on, what time. If we know who it is, we can predict his patterns, and we can have an FCC car this time drive up to him rather than James and I driving our trucks up to him. And hopefully we resolve this. So.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. That's, the FCC is so thinly staffed, and everything is so thin as it is. In order to actually, as much as we'd love to just say, hey, this guy's cutting us up, go get him, it just doesn't work that way. It didn't work that way before they were too thin, and then lots and lots of people got cut. So we have to follow the letter, follow their procedures to the letter if we're going to expect some help and action. So we're just asking for some cooperation and support from all the members to help us do that.
Yeah, it's just a little kind of a tidbit. We were trying to get an FCC direction finding car to go out and get one of the local field engineers, enforcement engineers, Nikki Shears, to have her go out and witness this. But we were able to find him first. That information was sent to the commission, and it was forwarded up to the council, Laura Smith, Council for Amateur Radio, and she basically said, well, a federal agent didn't witness this. What can I do with it? And the commission staffer, who's at the deputy division chief level, so he's at kind of the middle management of the commission, said, these guys have taught me more about radio and direction finding than anybody else. They know what they're doing. And Laura's response was, this will be the first time that I'll send a letter without a federal agent witnessing. So let's keep that high level credibility. Let's not egg him on. And when we do egg him on, if James or you hear myself egging him, we're doing it for a reason. Follow our lead. We'll let you know if we need help with the egging. But what we do need help is with the reporting. So I will mute now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Any other questions from anybody? Okay. Thank you all. Thanks for, like I said, the support and the cooperation. Back to you, Joe.
I don't think, is Wayne here? Since I screwed up with James. All I know is that they're having a CCREC meeting today, and that may be where that's online. So I have no idea what they're doing. So
yeah, that's not till 1 o'clock, Joe.
Anyway, Red Feather update. I have submitted the report to the county that James wrote up. By the way, thank you very much for doing that. It was an extremely well written report. I appreciate that. And I got back, we are very interested in this from the county standpoint, but we're not the ones that basically have to approve it. The Forest Service has to. So it's been submitted to the Forest Service, and I've heard nothing back, and that was about a week and a half ago. I'll keep everybody posted on what we're doing, and in fact, in back of me, this is actually the tower, thanks to Doug coming up with these pictures of this, of where we're actually looking at. Any questions about that? Okay, moving right along. Field day. I'm going to turn this over to Greg and Zero EMP.
Good morning, everybody. Field day is still on. We have 2 acres at the ranch up in the far northwest corner, northwest of Arena Circle, kind of behind the big brick ranch side. Along there's a windrow of small evergreens there on the north border. Up in there, I got some communication just the last couple of days from them. I need to write an infection control policy for the county health department to be happy. Problem is their requirements change and will continue to change, especially between now and the end of June. So I'm trying to write something generic that they'll be happy with. We might possibly be limited to 10 people at any one given moment in time during the event. Or they may relax that or not enforce that at the end of June. There may be some kind of mask requirement, most likely only during those times when we're kind of bunched together, like helping each other set stuff up. There might be other requirement to wear masks for that. And there'll be some requirements for potentially checking in and out of the whole facility. They're running kind of an EOC operation there with the overflow hospital bed construction and whatnot. That operation's been extended until at least July 12th. So we may need to show ID and check in at the entry to the whole compound off of the public road. And there might be a waiver we may need to sign, a couple other requirements that are being talked about at this point. If someone has a concealed weapon permit, they might want to know about that ahead of time is one thing that got mentioned. That'll all be ironed out between now and the event, but at this point it's still on. Any questions at this point on any of that?
Yeah, Greg. Does it sound like they're just being bureaucratic, or do you think that we'll be able to work out these details to be able to satisfy them?
There was an actual meeting a few days ago, so I think a regularly scheduled meeting of county officials for the ranch, and it included the sheriff's department, and it included our Tom Gonzalez might be his name, if the county health director was part of this. And this event actually came up, and they were happy to have and support the event. County health department had some requirements. They actually talked about a mask requirement, and I emailed them back. And part of the situation was in the middle of this, we got handed off to a new person at the ranch that's going to be directly supporting us. And I pointed out, are you aware this is like 10 people or so on a spread out over 2 acres outdoors? And they said, yeah, maybe there won't be a mask requirement for that situation after all. So we're ironing some things out. It's a mixture of bureaucracy and prudence in varying proportions. But we'll get it worked out. There won't be one thing for sure. There won't be any one person cooking for everybody because of this, even though we weren't really kind of going that direction anyway. Steve in the past, when we've done a joint effort, has done like pancake breakfast and stuff. Due to this COVID concerns, we're not going to have anything like that this year. So all attendees will be responsible for their own meals. We'll probably Joe, can we have like beverages, sodas and stuff?
Yeah, that would be, I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah,
As
we'll
long
have
as-
individually packaged stuff, maybe some snacks and individually packaged beverages, water, sodas, ice, but no no big communal meals or anything like that. Any
Hey,
other
Greg,
questions?
is there a public address for this event? One of the things we've talked about down here in Firestone is on these group events that you can't serve food, having an address that a Grubhub or one of these food delivery services, giving business to the local businesses, small businesses that are trying to stay active, they can deliver to you. Potentially, if you've got, whoa, that's a big close up of Gizmo. All of a sudden, this eye looking at me. But I think Gizmo wants to be fed, Greg. It's just something to think about, that you could conceivably order your food as a pizza, some wings, and have it delivered to the gate.
I really like that idea. Unfortunately, even if there is an address, I don't think that it would work very well in any kind of a mapping program.
Okay.
Also, one other thing we have to be very careful about is when we rent space from those guys over there, and I don't know if this really applies just to the buildings or outside, we have to go to their catering service.
Well, if we're providing catering, but if people are ordering their own, I think it's a free for all.
I don't know. It's something we'd have to
Yeah.
look at the contract at.
Yeah, we would not be we would not be contracting with a caterer. So if an individual wanted to do something like Grubhub, bringing a food truck out there would be a problem. That would be
Oh, darn. I was just
catering.
going to suggest food trucks.
Yeah. But
Following on with Doug's suggestion, something we could do is either get some canned directions that people can use, and then maybe put out some flags or something and tell the driver, go to this spot and then follow the flags.
Again, we need to look at the contract to see that we can do this.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of these contracts with the ranch, and let me tell you, they're pretty specific, but they could be because they're just in the building. But then again, it's a blank contract, and Darren, you've read them too. They're pretty specific about what they want.
Yeah, I've seen the contract. I worked on the contract with them. We couldn't have a caterer like a food truck out there or some event caterer. But if an individual out there, first of all, we can bring our own food. Secondly, this one nice thing about this location, there's a lot of food nearby. But if some individual attendee at the event called Grubhub or the other food delivery service, I forget who they are, to pick something up from a local restaurant and bring it out, that would not be in conflict with the contract. And there's not an address for like the dirt lot we're going to be in, but you could describe, come in the north entrance and head west and look for the guy with the sign waving at you. And we could get either, I don't know if they can use GPS coordinates or not, but we could get them in. We could get a
We
Grubhub
get GPS
driver.
coordinates. We've also got a couple of those signs that we've used from Hamfest that we could stick out there on by the road.
Yeah. Tell them, drive west on the north side of Arena Circle and look for all the big antennas up in the air and the RVs over in the dirt lot to your right, and they'll find it. That is a good idea, though, to make sure we can encourage some local food delivery up there.
Anything else? Any other questions?
I'll be doing an email at the end of this month, about 30 days out, just to try to get a kind of a rough head count of how many people will be interested in participating this year based on the current situation with COVID and everything else. So you'll see that here in about a week.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. And Mike, I see you waved, and you made the TV show on Wednesday night. So election results, I guess you can say. The bylaws say that in the April meeting, we will basically take nominations and this and that. And we told everybody but one person on the board wanted to stay. And Tony is going to pick up the secretary's spot from KDOWDX. Thank you, Steve, for doing that. I really appreciate all your hard work on this type of thing. So I'm just basically saying that the election's over because we don't have anybody to vote for, because the nominations were supposed to be in by the end of the April meeting, and there were no nominations. Okay.
So do you want Tony to wave to everybody so they know who he is?
That would be nice. I see him. He's here. Tony, hi.
Have him speak up.
Hey, I'm here.
There he is.
Coming in remote here.
Would you like to introduce yourself to everybody out there?
I'm Tony, KD0WDX. I'm not entirely new to being in leadership. I was PAO for a few years back. But glad to try out secretary for a few rounds here.
And what else is recent as of yesterday?
Of course you're pushing that. Well, I have recently, I'm not sure how official it is, but finished all my classes for CSU, so I am sort of kind of graduated. So
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
You bet.
Thank you very much.
Well done in these times.
Now you're going to go on to what now?
Taking a gap year and applying to veterinary school.
Very good.
Yep.
It seems like everybody there has an animal in the room, so you might have a lot of work.
Yep, there is ever steady demand for it.
Well, very good. Has anybody got any questions for Tony? He seems to have a kinship with our treasurer, so I think we'll probably get our reports done rather quickly.
Oh, I'm sure he'll hound me for it.
If you didn't know it, Tony is Darren's son.
Yeah, that's it. That's if you can keep him awake.
Or maybe we could have Tony work on Darren to stay on track.
That might be true.
Anyway, that is the elections. As I mentioned last club meeting, so far we have 44 people on this little chat, and I think it's a real good idea to go ahead and broadcast even our live meetings when we go live. Now, there's been a lot of things in the news about buffets are not a good idea at this time, so we don't know when we're going to open up or if we decide to move someplace or something like that. But I'd like to be really, really solid with Sarah and Jonathan over there. If they open up, I'd like to be there. So we're still going to broadcast this live. However, in dealing with the two people who'll be doing this, and that's Jim and Dave, they both say that they are not quite equipped to be able to do all this. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and he has some ideas on some equipment that we might need to buy as a club. Dave, you up there?
Yep. Hey, Joe, and thank you. As Joe said, we have definitely noticed an increase in participation as we've been doing live streams, and we want to continue that trend. So I've come up with a list of equipment. Some of the equipment I have, for example, my camera doesn't do a clean HDMI output. So unless you want it to look like we're taking a picture, it doesn't really work for a live stream. So I've kind of put together some ideas on what we need. And as Joe said, the board noticed the turnout in the last club meeting and in this club meeting. And we know that several people can't make it to our Golden Corral meetings on Saturday mornings. So we'd like to continue the engagement and move to live broadcasting our club meetings to the YouTube channel. The equipment that we're going to need, obviously, is going to be the camera with clean HDMI.
Excuse me, Dave.
Yeah.
Could you please have someone allow you to share your screen so your your presentation will be more viewable?
It's up.
Yeah,
It's not shared. It's just Dave's picture.
yeah, it's
Green. It'll fill the whole thing.
Dave, can you share?
it's not on the same computer.
Oh.
It was on
what you guys
the
can do is switch to what they call speaker view, which is one of the buttons on the upper right of your screen.
Yeah,
and then
it's
you're
the
speaking
my
from a
problem is I use a different machine that would take me having to move files around the network in order to get it onto that machine.
If I
On that speaker view, I see the slides.
Yeah, you can see them better if you're in gallery view. It makes them smaller, but you can see the entire slide if you go to gallery view and go to Dave.
So the equipment that we were talking about is the camera with the clean HDMI output, an HDMI capture device to plug it into our computer and get that clean HDMI feed. A portable audio mixer. I have a mixer, but it's a terrible inconvenience for me to tear apart my main working desk in order to bring it out there. And then the last piece is a microphone and stand. I've come up with a price list for the necessary equipment. I had a cheaper camera, but James had pointed out that it wasn't actually a compatible camera, so I've actually gone through the Elgato's CamLinks compatible devices list and found the Panasonic camera as one of the cheaper alternatives. And then the Elgato CamLink is a device to plug that camera into a computer. The Yamaha MG6X is a small soundboard. And the Shure SM58 is a microphone. All total, on the high side, that all comes out to $930. And some other ideas that we were having is, as we're getting into the warmer seasons, we're going to have a lot of work to be done on our repeater sites. So I'm hoping to do some more produced videos about our repeater sites and what goes into our repeaters. And there's going to be several tower climbs coming up. As with Jim's suggestion, we'd also like to get a GoPro Hero 7 to strap to James's head as he climbs the towers and get us some pretty good shots of climbing up the towers and a view of what he's doing while he's up there. I know.
I think it's more important to get those good shots of him climbing down.
Right.
Not falling down?
Exactly. Yes, we definitely want to get him climbing down. So all in all, what I'm getting at is I'd like to ask the club to approve $1,500. This is a little bit over anything that we need just to cover any unseen expenses or accessories like the strap to strap the camera to James's head, cables, things of that nature. That's
I have zip ties.
Pardon me?
I have zip ties.
Well, we could zip tie
I'm just
it to
joking, Dave.
yeah, so that's what I got. Does anybody have any questions?
I've got a quick question. This is Doug. We're looking at the exact same thing for our board of trustee meetings. How do we have a virtual seamless meeting with people out of the room? We're experimenting with a device right now called a Meeting Owl, and it's an all-in-one little box you put on your thing. It has a 180 degree or 360 degree screen. It'll try to zoom in on people talking, which may or may not work in that room very well. It has a mic and a speaker, and it's an all-in-one package. Plugs right into a USB to a computer running Zoom. And it would be a very simple and small package. Those devices are, yep, there you go. Anywhere from the regular Meeting Owl, I think, is about $800, and the Pro model in white, next just to the left there, is about $1,000. I have a Pro that we're experimenting with. You might just give it some thought. It's very simple, very few wires. You put this thing in the middle of the room on a computer and go. So Don't intend to stir up a murder hornet's nest here, but you might look at what's the smallest, simplest thing you can get away with. And also, Dave, I have somewhere an old GoPro, and if I can find it, I will donate it to you.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thanks.
But I've got to find where I packed it away.
Mike and 7MR.
Or if you can use that too.
We have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Thanks. So I'm not too worried about the money. I think we're doing well enough, but I do have a question. Do we need two cameras? Can the GoPro serve also as the meeting camera? Do we need the Panasonic?
That was brought up to me in the meeting. One of the things that a GoPro can't do is zoom and focus in on a particular person. So, yeah, I would much prefer. I mean, I'll do it with whatever I got, but it'll be a much better video if we can actually control the camera.
And one thing you have to remember is that when we buy radio equipment, we always buy the top of the line so we don't have to fool with it. Some of the old members of the club remember how we used to actually have to kind of throw things together to make these repeaters work, and then we put in $20,000 in repeater work, and now we just do it a lot simpler, much easier to troubleshoot than baling wire and bubble gum. So what I feel is best for Dave is to buy what he wants and with a good quality into it.
LCK?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, are we talking about doing recorded type events or live stream type of events where you'll be able to use it not only for meetings, but for field day or when it gets to be the point where we do the community supported events like the runs and bikes and things like that. I understand the GoPro is more recording only, but the other stuff sounds like you could have the possibility of doing live through the Facebook.
Yeah, so there is some capability, and I guess there are some devices that are just specifically to live stream on the go. They're in the range of $500 to $1,000. I'm not looking at one of those yet. I definitely want to grow the channel and grow our social media impact before tying up that much. As far as like recording goes, the camcorder would be able to record. However, that's not necessarily something that I have an issue with because my DSLR can do recording for produced videos, and I have a selection of lenses to try to get the best shot. The camcorder's primary use would be done through live stream, and there is still some equipment that I'd have to bring in. I'd bring my cell phone with its mobile hotspot to get the internet connection. I would bring a computer to run all of the software to do the live streaming, but ideally, I mean, what I want to avoid, just because it takes me a half hour to pull all of the stuff off of my desk, and then it takes me another hour to put it all back together so that my desk works correctly, which is kind of why I'm looking at like the soundboard to double up on that, because it's really difficult to pull my soundboard off of my desk and use it for other functions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And the other part that I was wondering about is, are we starting a new competition with James?
Oh, God, no. I could never keep up with James. I'll tell you that much right now.
That's an obvious question.
Dave, we had one question on the chat. What about a wireless microphone?
Yeah, I have a wireless microphone that we would be able to use for this, and that's not actually very hard to pull apart. The problem is passing it, because we don't necessarily have just one person talking during our meetings. What I envision happening is, rather than us moving around the room, the person that's talking is going to have to move up to the microphone just to make it an easier format for us to live stream. Another thing that our presenters or the person talking is going to have to get in the habit of doing is reiterating questions. So by no means is this something that's not going to take effort for us to get the right mix down. But yeah, when it's appropriate, I definitely will use my wireless microphones. But for the format, I think that a wired microphone and having us go to that and be able to reiterate the questions so that the viewers on YouTube are able to understand and keep up with what's going on at the meeting. Any other questions?
I have a question. I'd like to learn a little bit more. I'd like to learn a little bit more about the camera. I think the other pieces, and I understand you not wanting to tear apart your setup. I can relate to that absolutely. Cameras seem to have a limited useful life these days in terms of technology changes. And I was just wondering, what kind of life cycle are we looking at regarding the camera? How far is this going to carry the club into the future? The other pieces, I think, make perfect sense, including a GoPro. But I was wondering about the Panasonic camera. That's the only thing that seems to be on the high side, and perhaps you can provide some detail about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the camera that I'm looking at, is the Panasonic HCV 770. It is actually one of the lower cost cameras that's on the Elgato Camlink's known good camcorders. So this camera is a 1080p camera. Which is what I generally work for. I do have some stuff that records in 4K, but I don't put videos out in 4K. I'll just use that for to like have that extra footage so I can fix any issues that are going on. It's really my drones that I take advantage of that 4K, but I still put out videos in 1080p, and like the amount of bandwidth that it's going to take, we're going to be doing that for quite a while. 1080p footage. Like I say, it's not a 4K camera, and I don't think that we're going to get into 4K for years still. So, any other questions?
WW8L.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Hey, I'm curious, is there anyone in the club besides you, DDZ, that can operate this equipment? That I'd be a little hesitant to have a whole setup that's then tied to just one person. So is there any kind of backup operator, like if you were to leave or be unavailable, we needed something recorded?
Yeah, Jim has been assisting me. He's been doing all of our Monday Tech Nets, and he's actually involved in the streaming of all of the nets. As my schedule has gotten more hectic, I have not been able to do as much of the streaming as I did. The first 3 years, I had done every single stream and produced every single video, and my schedule got so hectic that I couldn't keep up anyway. So we had already had to address that, and Jim K6ETE has been a huge help with all of that. Do you want to say hi, Jim?
Yeah, hi. This is Jim K6ET. Yeah, as far as equipment and that, it's fairly easy. I do professional photography and videography also, so it's not someone going in to help that doesn't have a clue what they're doing.
Does that answer your question, Tim?
Yes, thanks.
Any other questions?
Dave, do you have the chat window open? There's been a couple of questions and comments come in there.
Yeah.
Can you open it?
Yeah, let me go through it. Sorry, I have so many screens up.
It would be easier for you to read these than it would for Darren and I to kind of repeat them.
One of the suggestions was 1 to 2 additional omnidirectional microphones for crowd responses. It's a good idea. However, it would require a larger soundboard in order to bring that audio into the stream, and that just increases the expense, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, but I've definitely tried to keep expenses under control. The next question was from John Schmidt. Is the soundboard necessary? How about a good quality USB mic, such as a Yeti Nano? You know, I have had a lot more issues. So the problem with it is that when I'm doing all of this stuff, it's much more difficult to keep track of everything. In a soundboard, I can really be sure that the sound quality is coming through, and you know, when it comes to videos, audio quality is a huge concern. People are much more willing to deal with glitches in video than they are with glitches in audio. So while we probably could do it with a USB mic such as a Yeti, I would prefer to keep my workflow very similar to the way I'm accustomed to working, and keep that point of failure to a minimum.
I'd like to add to that. As you can see from the background, I've played in a lot of bands over the last 40 years, and I don't know anybody that just has good mics. A soundboard is always extremely necessary for projects like this, because it's a way to control it. Otherwise, you're just hoping things will work.
Is there any other questions?
Yeah, Dave, how much of a cost difference would we be talking to get a bigger board in the directional omnis for the meeting room? My biggest concern about about people getting up and coming to the mic is, you know, thinking at least as long as we're at the Golden Corral, when that room is packed, it's hard to move around in there. So, you know, what would the cost difference be to add that functionality that people online could hear? I don't want to cause unnecessary expense nor complication, but at the same time, my experience, even anywhere from a small meeting to a large convention, is when you have a single mic that people need to come up to, they just don't. People shout out questions and then the audience can't hear. So I was just wondering, what do you think is it something we should look at, or am I on the wrong track?
You know, I haven't done a lot of research on the omnidirectional microphones and additional microphones, so I don't have a lot of details on that. The soundboard would be approximately $150 to $200 more expensive to go up to a 10 channel. The 10 channel is going to have 4 XLR inputs, which is what like the omnidirectional microphones and whatnot are gonna plug into, and I believe the size larger than that is about $350, $400 for a 16 channel soundboard. So the soundboard is not too terribly expensive. Decent quality microphones really start at around $100 and work their way up from there. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your questions. And I'm not opposed to putting together a larger audio system for this. Like I said, I've just been trying to keep expenses under control.
Question from me. Can we upgrade the things for around $2,000, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1,500 was definitely well over what I cost to do any upgraded expenses. I'm sure we could get at least 1 or 2 omnidirectional microphones plus a 10 channel soundboard in the range of $2,000.
What's everybody think of that?
I was going to suggest that the package that he's put together at the moment is a great place to start. and that doesn't limit us from building onto it as we go and find out what we need.
Well, in a place that may be a good place to do a upgrade is the soundboard, to get a 10-channel soundboard rather than a 4-channel or 6-channel, but 2 of those channels are stereo, so it's really like a 4-channel soundboard. That may be a decent place to do an upgrade. That way we could bring in microphones later on.
That's what I was going to suggest, is just upgrade the soundboard now to the 10-channel, and we can always add microphones later on if we find that we need more, or an additional one in the center of a room or something. That can always be added on without having to replace any equipment.
Well, why don't we open up a proposal for $2,000 for this equipment? Do I hear someone? I'll propose it. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. I'll start out by saying, is anybody against this? That's good. all for it, raise their hands or say hi.
Hey.
Yeah.
Okay. You got $2,000, Dave.
Hey, Joe, could you use this to record some of your tech and general classes?
Yeah, and we will. The thing that we don't want to do is we found out from most of the instructors, they like to record it and then do the class and just have that. That's bad, because we have a lot of questions coming in from people. We would probably record it and stream it live.
Oh, okay.
But we probably would, and we would probably archive it also. But the thing that we don't want to do is lock these people into, hey, well, I have a question and I got to email the guy to find out. So that's an excellent point, though. Any other questions?
Well, if I could add to that question, obviously this is something that we're all moving into because of the current situation. And we recently did the general class over Zoom and had fantastic response. People seem to love it and want to try to continue classes over Zoom, being a lot more convenient that way. I also, the last couple of sessions, recorded that and made that available to the students that missed a particular session. So we can continue and do something like that. It wouldn't be as interactive, but it might provide a little more than just a straight recording.
This is Mark, K0FNL. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah. Yep, we got you, Mark. Go ahead.
Hey, Dave, your audio equipment, microphones and mixers and stuff might be able to save you some money. My little brother is very high up with Sound Pro out of Texas, and he's a ham. So if you have specific model numbers that you can email to him, he would love to quote it.
Sure. Do you want to email me his contact info?
Yeah, I will do that, and I'll let him know to expect to see it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, bet. Bye.
Another option we might have, and again, this is maybe not, is as you know, we did a Ham Nation thing here on last Wednesday, I think it was. And Bob Heil and I have been talking back and forth, and his equipment is just top notch. We might be able to get a break from him, but probably just on the microphones. I don't know if he goes into the other things. James, do you know if he goes into the other things? Soundboards and that?
Who's that?
Bob Heil.
I don't know.
Any other questions? I thank you very much for this, because we're moving into another phase of this club, and it opened up a lot of avenues for a lot of people who are kind of stay at home, or, hey, it's snowing to beat heck, I don't want to go out there. So they can log in and get us on this and be able to ask questions also. And that's the nice part about all this. Any other questions? Good morning, Al. I see you showing up.
Good morning, Joe. And I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Do you need those photos for your next presentation on Ham Nation?
We just did it last week.
You never got back with me. I have them.
I thought you were going to get back with me. I'm sorry. Yeah, we did it last Wednesday.
Do you have another one coming up?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I screwed it up so bad they don't want me back.
I doubt that.
That's
Just
not
ask Mike.
true. That's not true.
I'll watch it. I'll go online and watch it.
Yeah, they've got it online for sure.
Apologies for that because they've been sitting on my desk here. So.
Oh, not a problem. Not a problem. Update on some testing. Darren, I'll let you take this because you know where it is and the rest of it.
All right. I know that a number of people have probably been looking to get a test in to upgrade, or know somebody that is looking to get their tech license. So starting on Tuesday evening, we're going to have 2 rounds of testing. It's going to be done as safely as possible. It's going to be a copy of what we did last week for the folks that tested for their general class. It's going to be at Greg's garage. We've got plenty of space there to stretch out and have nobody within 6 feet of each other. The sign up will be through a quick and dirty Sign Up Genius page that I created, and I'll get that posted out to the website and dropped into email this afternoon. To keep with safety guidelines, we're only going to test 4 people at a time, and there will be 2 time slots, so we'll be able to accommodate 8 people on Tuesday evening. Any questions?
Very good. Thank you for that, Darren.
Okay.
Question? I guess not. We are owned.
The DAS asked about cost. This is going to be through Laurel, so there will be no cost.
Okay. Next thing I have is we are opening up a teleconferencing tech class sometime in June, the middle of June. Right now, I have 11 people that are signed up for it. We can take on a limited amount of people. If anybody's interested in doing a technician's class, spouse, friend, relative, whatever, please send me an email at president@ncarc.net, and I will get you signed up with all the information you'll need to do this. It's going to be a 4 to 5 week course. And then at the end of it, we will try to do a test session somewhat similar to what we're doing now, unless it opens up and we can do whatever. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, moving along. We would like to update our NCARC bylaws. And the reason we do is we are moving more into a social media type area where we need another person. And it's getting too much for everybody to be able to do this. And what we would like to do is add another spot to the members at large. I was told a long time ago, a member at large is we could have unlimited or at least up to 3 people. And so what I've asked Jim to do is actually rewrite the bylaws, and I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and he can explain what we've done or what he's done.
Okay, I'll make this easy for everyone. Let me share my screen there. Everyone see it?
Yep, sure can.
Yeah, we see it, Joe.
Okay. It was pretty simple to do. I'm very familiar with bylaws, rewrote quite a few and rewrote quite a few of them. The current bylaws only state, if you read section 6 of the bylaws right here, that club board members consist of president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, technical committee officer, public affairs, station trustee, and the current version only has and 1 board member at large. The change would be changing the wording for up to 3 board members at large. That wouldn't necessarily mean that there would be 3. It would leave a spot open, 1 to 2 spots open on the members at large that the board could fill as they needed to prevent having to change the bylaws again in the future. It also adds the board members at large position will be filled as needed, determined by the current board members. This number may vary between 1 and 3 as outlined in these bylaws. It's a simple addition and change of the bylaws. And another area that would be changed in the bylaws is under Part 7, Section 2 of the bylaws, elected official posts shall be technical committee, public affairs officer, board members at large, elected officials are to be elected by the general membership, and in addition to the officers, form the club board. Added in a clause to where if at any time a position on the board of directors is vacant, the current board members may appoint a member to the position in an interim status until the next members meeting, at which time the position would receive an official vote for membership. It's given the board the ability to add a person to the board in an open position to help fill a void, but it would still be voted on by the membership to make it official at the next membership meeting. So it would be something similar now to where they're looking to add the additional member at large. If this was in there, they could add the member at large in right now, and then it would have been at the membership meeting today. If it would have been added 3 weeks ago, today the members would have been able to vote that person in officially. If that makes any sense to anyone. Like I said, it's a couple simple changes, nothing major in the bylaws. It's just updating it to make it current and allow for more board members. Anyone have any questions?
Jim, there's a couple in the chat room.
Let me.
One of the questions I can answer, and I don't know who wrote this, should it read 0 to 3 in lean years? No, we are basically required, or we should have at least one at all times.
Yeah, no, you want to have at least one member at large at all times. It's just up to 3. That way they could add 1 or 2 depending on the needs of the group. For some reason, mine went into full.
So the next question on there is, can you expand on why we need larger board to accomplish the club's goals? And it really comes down to your question earlier, Tim, as our schedules are changing and getting less flexible, and as we've increased the time that people are on the board, it really just helps us to have the flexibility to have other people to help with like the social media aspect of the club, or somewhere where there's a shortfall that the current board can't cover.
Why would I understand why we need more help, but why would the additional help necessarily need to be on the board? Could you, if the board wanted to have someone help with social media, anybody could help with that without necessarily having a board position, couldn't they?
Well, so realistically, like, we're looking at Jim. Jim has been helping me with the club's YouTube page and doing the streaming, and has we said, as we continue to work more and more, we find more and more that Jim is able to help us solve that not all of us that are currently on the board have the time to do. Bylaws are a perfect example of something that the present board members knew that we didn't have the time to prepare before this meeting, and that got thrown into Jim's lap, and Jim took it happily. So as that's been a kind of ongoing issue with timing over the for a while at the end of last year, Jim jumped in and filled that gap, and we've been taking advantage of that for 6 months now, of Jim filling that gap. So as we were chatting in the board meeting, we really discussed about how it's been a couple of years, and every year has been better than the year before. We're in May, and we're close to surpassing the largest number of members that we've ever had before. So
Actually, on that point, we surpassed where we were last year at this time and are still continuing to climb steadily.
So the point is that we're not seeing the workload slowing down, but we are seeing Jim covering the gap in the workload as if he were a board member. We really just want to make it official.
And I have to add, why not? We've got the option to do this, and to have a guy volunteer for this and come in and do all the work and then not have any voting rights just doesn't seem right. And so
Right.
I'm the one that
That's
actually.
the key point is that he giving him an official spot on the board would then give him the ability to set his own course there, rather than just being a slave to whatever the board says. It would give him more of a voice.
And this doesn't mean that somebody else couldn't run against him. This is an open field. I mean, like I said, we first need to, the way this works is we have to post these bylaws for 30 days, and you have the option at any time to vote on those things. And I'm going to go to Darren when we talk about this, because you'll be able to vote online for this type of thing. And then next month we'll come back and we'll say, okay, we've got this position. This person wants to run for it. Is there any other person? This is not, I'm going to put this person in this spot. I cannot do that. Okay. This is a legitimate type election type situation.
Well, and we definitely feel like additional members of the board is going to help represent the club in a better fashion. We don't want to keep tasking people with, and I'm not saying that we aren't going to tap people. We have a lot of stuff coming up that we're going to be asking for volunteers for. What we're saying is that there's been a gap in the amount of work that us as the board has been able to accomplish, and Jim has fallen into that gap and already been filling that gap. So that's led to the board having the conversation about how we continue this into the future, and if we continue to get larger, how we address those concerns going into the future. And this seemed like the best resource or best means by which to accomplish that goal.
I always use the analogy a good friend told me, and he probably stole it from somebody else. You're always going to do what you always do. If you always do what you always done, you're always going to get what you got. And that's why any idea, and I've said this early on, any idea that comes up, we're going to try to do it if you think it's the right way to go and it's not legal. If it's legal, we're good to go. But I mean, and this is just something we can expand, and we need to expand. Okay. I could see this club at 300 and 400 members here probably in the next few years, just because of guys like Jim and Dave and the rest of these guys that are actually doing a lot of the promotions for us. That answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, and I have no problem with adding Jim to the board. I would just throw a little caution out there at the notion that in order to do work for the club or be contributing, you'd need to be a board member. To your point, if we get to 300 or 400 board members, does that mean is the size of the club expands, the size of the board then too would expand linearly with it? That we might then, if we're at 400 board members, now we need to have or at 400 members, we then need to have a board that has 12 or 15 people on it because there's more work to do. So I would just caution that as the board moves, it does its job as a decision-making body, but not necessarily the operational body, because you're going to need to have volunteers or committees of volunteers that do stuff that aren't necessarily board members.
I totally agree. Everybody in this club has a right to do whatever they want to with us. And we ask for volunteers all the time.
Well,
and I would.
Sorry, Joe. I would point out that I approached the board with the YouTube thought prior or before I was ever a board member, and I started doing the YouTube thing for I think I did it for almost 6 months before I became a board member. And it seemed like it fit the role because I was already dealing with so much public affairs that the public affairs position seemed to suit me well. So the point I guess that I'm making is that we definitely don't require people to be on the board. I was doing the YouTube thing for months before I was offered on a position on the board or sought a position on the board. And the same thing goes with Jim. He's been helping us for months without being a member of the board. We're just trying to look to the future of how we continue to keep this growth trend up and how we meet the work needs. And I definitely hear your concern about wanting to keep adding people to the board members, and that's kind of why we've addressed it as 3 board members, is so that ultimately we are hoping that we are going to get to the 300-400 member range here fairly soon, and that workload may require us to add that additional member. So at this point now, we're only looking at adding 1 more member at large. But as you saw in the update to the bylaws, we've left ourselves the room to add 1 more.
Okay, I think we've beat this thing to death enough. Darren, I'm going to turn to you on how we're going to be voting for this.
All right. What we'll do, because the bylaws require it to be posted for 30 days, we'll get the text of the change up on the website. Here, I'll do that this afternoon, or by this afternoon. And then give everyone a chance to look at that. And parallel with that, I'll be setting up a voting page on the website so that you can log into the website, make your vote, and it will get recorded. And then at the end of probably 30 days plus a week or so, we'll have the results on that. And I will send out an email to that effect along with the instructions for how to vote. But for those of you that have not logged into the website or have never logged into the website, you might want to check into that. There's an option there to recover your password or send me an email at info@ncarc.net and we'll get you set up.
Okay, enough about this. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Doug Sharp, K2AD, who has an excellent presentation on DMR. Doug, take it away.
Gotta find my unmute button. Okay. I am just who's got the meeting? How can I?
Darren does.
That would
request...
be me. Sharing should be open, so you should be able to go ahead and do that.
So let me.
Typically, it's going to be on the
there we go.
Of your screen.
And that should. I'm just trying to move all these things on my screen. Sharing has failed to start. So I don't quite know why. If I do that.
There we go.
There you go.
But now I've got to. Is that working?
Yep.
That looks beautiful.
We're now full screen. I've lost the chat window. So maybe if somebody is going to make a chat comment, you can tip me off.
You can actually move your mouse and bring it up as a floating window now, but I will let you know if anything comes up.
Well, yeah, I've got PowerPoint in full screen, and I'm sharing on screen 2 and not screen 1, and I'm just a little bit screen challenged here. So,
Darren, this is Ralph.
Yes.
May I suggest that someone be a co-host and manage the chat pod for Doug, so that he can focus so he can focus on his presentation, and then you can insert comments as appropriate. Just an observation. It's nice to have a co-host to manage security issues and also to manage the chat pod.
Joe and I are taking care of that, but thanks for the suggestion.
Okay. Darren, you can be the HAL 9000. And
sorry, I can't do that.
So, but that's what you say to DDZ. I'm sorry, I can't do that, Dave. So Well, good morning. I think it's still morning. And welcome to Digital Mobile Radio for the Challenged. And yes, don't complain to me about the title. Joe picked the name. So glad we're all here. I really miss having our regular meetings. I guess we still have a little bit of video up, but I want to know where the host is to bring me some fresh coffee. That's the one thing I'm missing. So we're going to talk a little bit. There you go, NCARC Cup. I just have a Starbucks venti. So we're going to talk a little bit about DMR. Don't be offended by the "Are you challenged?" because we're all challenged. I'm challenged on DMR. If I don't learn something new every day with it, I'm not using the protocol. It is a complicated protocol. A friend of mine, W0KU, is very fond of saying, it's too complicated. It's not going to work. And he's right. And often very complicated things sometimes we have trouble making them work. I don't think DMR is too complicated, but and so we're going to go into about the theory of everything. So to understand, and by the way, if you have any questions, break in with the audio or send it in the chat, but just feel free to speak up. I threw some slides together. I only have, I think, 250 slides, so we'll be quickly through these and we'll take requests and bridge around. All you have to do is understand the equations and you'll know what DMR is. So what are we talking about today? This is a kind of a buzzword, a fad, some people will say. DMR is a digital radio protocol. It started with Motorola. It has since moved on to other manufacturers. The hams have adopted this protocol on 2 meters and 440 mostly, because that's where equipment is available. There are multiple tiers. We're going to be talking about the tier 2 products today, or the offering. With this, DMR is a commercial protocol. But so is D-Star. Well, that's not a commercial protocol, but NXDN. These are all in this black box, things that aren't DMR. These are all digital radio protocols. We're going to be talking about just one. And as I put in the bottom here, don't think that the things that I put in the box, that things that aren't DMR are bad. They're not. They're good. They're just not what we are talking about today. Right now, we have a number of digital protocols. There's people on this call I know that have D-Star. There's people that have system fusion, or as sometimes I refer to it as system confusion, because it can be a little confusing sometimes. I don't know if anybody's running NXDN or P25. I guess there are some on P25. There's a 900 meg system on there. These are all great protocols, and as hams, we like to experiment, don't we? Let's play with this new protocol. But what we have done is there are more DMR systems in the area than any other protocol. We've somewhat, I don't want to use the word standardized, but it's a popular protocol. But this is not a war of the digital protocols. It's not that for D-Star, D-Star has to lose for DMR to win. And we're starting to look into ways to bridge and interoperate between the protocols, but we're just not quite there yet. We're going to be today talking about, hopefully you've got some questions about DMR Tier 2, and which is a TDMA, Time Division Multiple Access Protocol, with interconnection between the repeaters, but it is not trunking, where we have multiple repeaters and we can handle, instead of 2 simultaneous conversations, 5 or 10 simultaneous using the trunking protocols. That's getting a little bit complicated. So
nope. Did we lose audio?
There we go. I'm assuming everybody can see these slides and the audio is okay. I unfortunately have a little button that can mute, and occasionally it gets accidentally pressed. Maybe I can
Yep, you're good
put
now,
that
Doug.
little pod down in my shirt here. There we go. So we've got digital voice, and this is just a favorite slide of mine that's an approximate slide. If we're talking, and I don't know that I need to get one of those on the screen laser pointers. I don't know if my laser point, my arrow pointer projects over to you guys. Well, let me see if I can.
Yes, it does.
Okay, I can kind of see it on Dave's screen. It's kind of nice that he's feeding the presentation back so I can see what you're seeing.
As long as the mouse moves, we see your pointer, but when you stop, yours.
So the green line here is typical analog FM, and the graphs are not quite this square. It was just, this was an easy way to draw it. But as we start out with analog voice, it's very good quality, and we all have grown accustomed to it. And then as noise starts to get in, as we get further from the repeater, it starts to degrade, and you get to a point that there's more noise than there is signal. And if you're running a, what's the politically correct way of saying it? An imported radio with less than desirable audio characteristics. Sometimes your voice is so low that the noise is just louder than your voice. With digital protocols, DMR, D-Star, the others, they start out not quite as the same quality at strong signals, but they hold very well when the signal gets noisy until they just kind of, the knee falls off and it just gets really bad. And you'll hear people saying you've gone digital or you've gone R2D2 because you're getting more beeps and boops out of it than you're getting real audio. So all of these protocols are digital, and I know some of the Aries nets that we've been experimenting with digital. And I think one of our net controls that was the last net is on here, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have a big enough window of all the people here, but it kind of takes a little getting used to digital audio, doesn't it? But once you get used to it, I don't want to go back to analog, to noisy analog. So we're talking about DMR and what's the really good thing. And here's a slide that says why it's good in a whole lot of words. But the bottom line is it is 4 times more efficient than analog FM. An analog FM signal, and this is a very common question, or people don't understand really how big is my analog FM signal? How big is the parking space that I need to have, my channel, to put my analog FM car into it? And analog FM is basically, as I kind of joke with this, it's like trying to park a Chevy Suburban into a downtown parking space in either downtown Fort Collins or downtown Boulder. The vehicle is bigger than the parking space. So when we take on 2 meters, we have a channel every 15 kilohertz, don't we? Well, an analog FM signal is 16 kilohertz wide. You're hanging over into the next channel on either side with that. A DMR, a D-Star, all of these digital protocols are narrower. You can see the emission designators on the screen. They're narrower, and on top of this, DMR does 2 time slots or 2 conversations in one. So let me give you the 1,000-word equivalent. Let's just go to a picture. Up on the top, the dark blue bar, we've got a wideband FM. That is a 5 kilohertz deviation. The emission mode that you studied on your test, if you've just been through the general exam, I think emission modes are on the general, if I'm not mistaken. I see Darren shaking his head. Thank you, Hal. And if you start singing Daisy, I'm signing off here. So that's a 16 K0 F3 F3D. No, excuse me, F3E. Emission. There you go. He's got changed his backdrop. So 16K0, 16 kilohertz. F for F3E means FM voice. DMR is 7K60, and they use a bunch of different letters, but typically it's FXD or FXE. So it's a 7.6 kilohertz wide signal as opposed to 16 occupied bandwidth, and much narrower. You can see down here there's D star, and there's also, it's just labeled on this chart D star, but that could be Kenwood's commercial protocol NXDN. And those are very narrow bandwidth. And then DMR is on the bottom. Here it's utilizing 7K60, 7.6 kilohertz of occupied bandwidth, which is within a 12.5 kilohertz channel. But I have 2 time slots. I'm first transmitting one, then the other. And so I've got a blue signal and an orange signal. And they're sharing the channel. And we'll get into that a little bit. Over on the right screen, so if we look at one conversation, the blue bar is what analog FM would be. The orange blocks is the amount of utilization a DMR signal is using. So it's a lot more efficient. And do we have a shortage of channels? Well, I don't know. On this call early on, we had a new member. I guess I wrote it down. I think his call sign is W8LYJ, that said, could you tell me what repeaters are active in Loveland and Longmont? When I look at the repeater book, there's hundreds of entries, but are they all active? Well, you know, we have a lot of repeaters, but we don't necessarily have a lot of activity, but that's something for a different time. We can put a lot of activity on a single DMR. So I think people are familiar with TDMA, but there's probably somebody on here that isn't. So I'll just briefly go over.
Question, Doug?
Yes.
Back to the
Yes,
orange
Mike.
blocks. Is that the equivalent of 3 conversations in that bandwidth?
No, that is 3 slots. I'll show you in the next picture here.
Okay.
So that's a great question. Here I've got the orange and blue boxes down on the bottom. So what is happening, you notice all the orange boxes are the first slot of the, and I had a different slide. So a frame which contains 2 slots is a red and a blue. It's 60 milliseconds long, is each frame of each packet, if you think of it in that way. And within that is orange conversation or data and blue conversation or data. I'm going to tell you, let's say up here, we are on, you and I are talking on the orange. And there we go, my screen is. We're talking on the orange time slot, you and I. We're going to transmit for 30 milliseconds. Or I'm going to transmit for 30 milliseconds. You're going to hear it. And then I'm going to turn my transmitter off for 30 milliseconds to allow, I'm just picking 2 names. I can see Darren and Carrie on here. Darren and Carrie are going to be talking on the blue time. So they're going to turn their transmitter on, talk for 30 milliseconds, and then turn their transmitter off. Then we're going to go back on again for 30 milliseconds. Then they're going to go on for 30 milliseconds. We're going to be on the same RF channel, popping back and forth. And we're not going to know the other's there, because the repeater is doing all of the time synchronization. And I think I have that on another screen, but on the upper right here, we have some pictures. You know, right now what we have is essentially, now I used an example of 2 different frequency bands because we rarely have 2 different repeaters on the same band, like 2 2-meter repeaters up at the same site. But we could put 2 2-meter repeaters up there. We combine them together in very complicated and expensive cavity filters to have 2 radios into 1 antenna system and a big duplexer to have 2 parallel talk paths. double the transmitters, double the power amps, double the antennas. It's a lot of stuff. With DMR, I can put up one repeater. It's alternating the two, much simpler. And at these sites, as we'll all recall, Horsetooth Mountain said, oh, you can put whatever you want up there for free, right? No, they said, you're limited to what you can put up here. You better make it count. So there may be a day that we just say, hey, we're ready to move to digital, and we can get double the money, double the bang for our buck. Does that make sense and answer the question? Okay. Let me take a brief, I'm almost a quarter of the way through here, and we're going to try to keep moving fast. But any questions or thoughts, or do you guys want me to be a little more? And I think I found, nope, the chat window went away. There it is. Nope, that's, oh, I found the chat window. Okay. Okay, Hal, you're not telling me about these questions. So.
Sorry, it just came in.
Oh, okay. The appointed position will need to be voted on by the members. We're talking about the bylaws change, right? We want to talk about that some more. Oh, no.
No, that was earlier.
Yep. So Dennis, WB0BML asks, so my TYT DMR radio is programmed and has 2 channels for Horsetooth. Does that mean one is yellow and one is blue? Probably, but maybe not, depending on how you got it programmed. And I have a slide for that in about 2 slides. So Dennis, if I don't specifically answer this, stop me in about 4 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes. So any other thoughts, questions? Are you guys still awake? I can see a few of you are still awake, but I don't have everybody's picture up because I've got the presentation up. Okay. So, oh, I wonder if I can drag this. No, I can't. It's just not letting me put it over on my other screen so I can see all the people. One of the common things about DMR, and we said this is DMR for the challenged, and the biggest challenge is right here. A lot of people ask about identifiers. Yeah, you need one. Every radio has a number now. That can be good, that can be bad. You can put any number you want in there. You don't necessarily have to put one that we know, but you can put an identifier in there. And there is a website that you can go to, radioid.net. This website, you can sign up and get an identifier. It's free. They may only give you 2 or maybe 2 to 3 until you give them a reasonable justification for needing a whole bunch, because there's only so many in the world, and we're trying to keep them kind of unique. Once you do get one, it will go and be published on the worldwide database so that I can, so if you go to that database and say, who is 3108058, it should come up with my call sign. And when I send that identifier out, you're going to potentially know you're me. It's me. The reason I say potentially is, you know, what if I don't want to keep picking on Darren? Tony decides, well, I'm going to put Doug's ID in my radio and everybody will think it's him. Yeah, you could do that. Is that bootlegging? No, because the FCC didn't issue me that radio identifier number. It's just an alias. It's like saying Doug, or my name is Nebuchadnezzar. You know, it's just a name. Can you use it as official FCC identification? People say, well, it shows up. Your call sign comes up in my radio as K2AD, so you must have sent it over the air. No, it's because you've put that number in your radio and said, when you get this number, put K2AD on the screen so we know who's talking to me. So it's not a legal ID at the FCC. If you were to use the text messaging feature or a digital version of APRS, you would not be sending your call sign every 10 minutes. If you want to do that, you have to embed your call sign in the body of the text or like APRS does, they put their call sign in the APRS message. So if I want to be legal and I'm going to send a text message to Carrie, who's on my screen here, I would have to send in the body of the text, I would either have to identify in voice periodically every 10 minutes, or in the body of the text, I could just put K2AD : Carrie, are you listening to this particular talk group? And that would be legal because I would have identified, it's in plain text. No more identification is needed. The other thing a lot of people ask is, do I need a unique identifier for every radio I have? Well, it depends. Sometimes, but really not, but sometimes yes. If you're not going to be using the two radios at the exact same time, you can put the same identifier in. But if you're going to try to talk from one radio to the other radio because you might have one identifier and a radio for you, and your wife is licensed and you have a radio, you give her a second radio, those two radios aren't going to talk to each other because the protocol expects a radio number and it doesn't expect you to be talking to yourself. So in that case, you're going to need two. But if you have a single band 2 meter and a single band UHF and you're not using them at the same time, you could put the same identifier in. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, I'm seeing a few head nods of the few screens that I have. One of the other things for the challenged is talk groups. This is a little bit different. So DMR uses talk groups. This is kind of a little bit similar to a CTCSS tone on a community repeater. And I don't think we've had one of those in the ham bands in the Weld-Larimer area for quite a while, but there was at one point, they were, I won't say they were ever popular, but we saw a few of them in the 80s and 90s. These repeaters would listen to multiple CTCSS or PL tones. And whatever tone came in, people would listen for that tone, and it was kind of a way of muting the other people, but only one could be used at a time. And so instead of tones, analog tones, we use talk groups. These talk groups can be grouped by geographic regions. If you're on one of the worldwide networks, it can be by language, perhaps. There are some French-speaking and Swahili-speaking talk groups. It could be by content. There's like tech channels and there's club channels. These talk groups basically allow us to route that conversation to a repeater and then over potentially to another repeater and out somewhere else in the world potentially. So we're going to use talk groups, and we'll talk about those a little bit more. And this is where I'm kind of tying in Dennis, BML Dennis, the two channels on Horsetooth. And so the two channels on Horsetooth are actually using different talk groups on the two different time slots. So this is where I'm kind of going in to answer your question in a roundabout way. So we've got these talk groups. We're going to put them together. Rocky Mountain Ham and NCARC is two groups that have partnered together to, we're kind of blurring the line between whose is what stuff. We're just all using it and all building this network together. We use our talk groups in a static form. We define a particular talk group. We'll talk about talk group 700, which is what we call our Rocky Mountain wide talk group. That's a bad one to talk about. Let's talk about 721. That's a talk group we created for Northern Colorado, and it's actually aligned with the Northeast All Hazards region, R3 of Aries, which is Weld, Larimer, Logan, Morgan, all the way down to Lincoln counties. It makes this big arc in the, if you look at the Aries webpage, you'll see the R3. that 721 talk group is kind of affiliated with that area. It's a static thing. We have it available on our repeaters all the time. If you're not using it for that, that resource goes unused. Some would say that's not very good utilization, but it was purpose built for Aries to know when I key my microphone on Northern 721, it's going to go out on all those repeaters. You can have dynamic talk groups, and that's what Brandmeister uses. And they're very useful also. It's a dynamic, it's an adaptive situation. So how do you get to those? Because the Rocky Mountain Ham NCARC repeaters don't support that. You go over to another excellent group that's up in the Northern DMR group, or you go to the Denver Radio Club that has one on Brandmeister. Our two groups, RM Ham and NCARC, has one on Lee Hill. But we didn't duplicate where there's other clubs, because you just go to one of theirs and they have some of these dynamic talk groups. Not everyone, but a lot of them. And they're good repeaters, and so we cover the area together. When we need to bring all this together and go really wide area beyond the one repeater, we go into what's called a C bridge. And we'll talk briefly about that and kind of explain that to you. So what do you have to do to program your radio? This was for the challenged, and this is one of the challenges that I hear from a lot of people. And if we all had our microphones unmuted, I bet you if I said, has anybody on here had trouble programming their radio, I probably hear 4 or 5 people go, yep. Yes, with the isolation and work from homes and all these things, I have been, as DDZ said, on YouTube a little bit and watching, and they love this commercial for one of the new memory foam mattresses, and I get this thing of, the spokesperson is Jan Janssen, and I feel a little bit like him. Has anybody had a problem sleeping at night? Has anybody had a problem programming their radio? And all the hands in the audience go up. I'll bet you a bunch of you have. On an analog FM radio, it's real simple. You put your frequency. If it's on a repeater, you tell it the offset. You tell it the input and or optionally the repeater's output PL tone. Anybody can do it. And if you have a very limited radio without keypads, like how do you do that on this little thing here? This happens to be a Motorola, but there's no keys, so you got to use some computer software. You maybe use RT systems, third-party product. It's pretty easy. Well, DMR, still got to put in a frequency and an offset, but I got to add a color code, a time slot, a talk group, my radio ID, and then there's anywhere from about 3 to 3 dozen parameters that are specific to that radio. Those of you that know Scott, can you hear W0KU saying, it's too complicated, it's not gonna work? Well, it's not too complicated. So what you do, go to the RM Ham website. I think we even have, Darren, do we have a link from our website for code plugs to this one? I don't know, but if we don't, we might want to. This is a site that we are putting our code plugs in. You would go up onto here and go into the DMR network, and then this will pull down and you can get more code plugs. When you do, yes.
At this time, we do not have one.
Okay.
But it's a good idea.
We should, because there is a small group that's a part of this code plug team that we are developing code plugs for the Kenwood commercial DMR radios. And Joe Hawley here has one. I have one. Mark Skelton's somewhere on this call, I think. James. We're starting to create the code plug for our Kenwoods. And we may have some of this same brand in some of our EOCs, because I'm trying to find a good deal on some of these to put in the EOCs. And so we have a code plug team. Well, we've taken the time to say, well, we're going to update what's in our master code plugs. and put an R3D2 zone in it, for example, and maybe we realized all of the NCARC repeaters are not in our standard code plugs when you get them off the shelf. Why would we not put all of the repeaters of a partner sister club in our standard code plugs? We're going to add them. So you can go to the website, you can look for your brand down here, and you can see what the date on it is and some notes on it. I would encourage you to do this when you get a new radio. If it's here, start with these because there's a lot of stuff in here. The other reason is it gives you an interoperability mode because there's some simplex analog channels. There's some digital analog channels. There are other things in here, and that when we go to a radio that you need to plug into a computer and we're out there at field day or at the Aries exercise, and I suddenly need to talk to you, wouldn't it be nice if we had a common channel in there? But you're going to want some of your own stuff. So go ahead and customize that code, standard code plug with your stuff. Just put it in at the beginning or put it in at the end. And I would encourage you leave the other stuff in there unless you run out of channels in your radios. Most of these radios, you can put more channels than you could ever possibly want to do in your radio. So then when you go, I think I have a few of these out of order. When you go into the website, if you are going to roll your own, if you are going to try to program your own, we have in here our known DMR repeaters. We don't have everyone in Colorado because it changes fast enough that we can't keep up with it. But if we do know of other systems for other groups, we can try to list them. But all of the repeaters that we operate in our network are in here with our easy name, the detailed name, who's running them, the repeater input output, the color code. I didn't really go to color code much. The status and whether they're linked up or not, or there's a failure in the backhaul link. And again, this is all on the web page. This is just a small capture of it. I didn't talk about color code. Color code is simply a way of saying, it's funny, it's called a color code and then it's a number. But I think it's 1 to 15 or 0 to 15. Most repeaters start with, you see, the DMR for the challenged. I'm challenged. I don't even know how many color codes there are. But we normally use color codes 6, 7, or 8 on our repeaters. The Northern DMR group, I think, often uses 2 or 3. It's not exclusive. New repeaters or individuals often use 1. On my commercial networks, I usually use a higher number, like a 15 or something. But it's just a way of when the repeater is transmitting and your radio searches and finds a DMR signal, finds a repeater, it says, oh, what's your color code? I'm supposed to be listening for 7. And he goes, well, this is 3. This must be some other repeater. This isn't the one I'm supposed to be on. But if it finds a repeater on the frequency with that color code, it says, I bet you this is what I'm supposed to be listening to. So, so if you're going to program your stuff, you need all of this. But I said, don't forget about the Brandmeister repeaters. Well, the Brandmeister repeaters, you go to the Brandmeister network, and you can see it there, brandmeister.network. Zoom in on where you're trying to go to, and it'll tell you what the information for that repeater is. And you can also find out which dynamic talk groups they're using on those repeaters. You can see where they're connected. We can go into Brandmeister a little more after, but what I'm trying to get through is the basics. How do you know which talk group to use? Well, if it's our system that we've set up here, it's on the website here. The ones you're specifically going to use a lot, oops, wrong button here, is this talk group 700, which is all of Colorado, parts of New Mexico, and parts of Wyoming. Are, in our case, the northern 721. And you'll notice here we've added a 722, which is a Fort Collins local. We've started adding more locals in here as we've been building out the network. So right now, and James, if you're unmuted, I think all we have on 722 is Fort Collins. Isn't that right? The CSU repeater?
Yeah, that's the only one so far.
Okay. We could certainly add to that if we need to, or if Aries says, I'd really like to have this and that on there. We can do that, but we don't want to make the changes too quickly because everybody's got to update their radios. So, try to think about the request. It's kind of like a bylaws change. You got to propose it, motion it, let it sit. Let people talk about it, and then take a vote later, and we can do that. These talk group numbers can be anything from 1 digit to 6 digits. You're probably wondering, okay, you're noticing here most of ours are in the 700s. We selected that because that was a talk group number that wasn't used at the time when we started our system anywhere else in the world. And so we've kind of squatted on those with the potential that there may be a connection from our system into the worldwide system someday, or we would gateway certain traffic, which now we're doing. But these numbers have to be unique, because if we're using 700 and California is using 700 and we both put it into a national network, how are we going to know how to route these things? We have the same IP address or the same telephone number. So right now we isolate these to our network. We chose 700, and that's why we chose that for the widest area. For our locals, we said, well, what can I use in the 700s? And I said, well, let me use for around Denver 720. Happened to be one of our area codes. I used for the Colorado Springs area, well, 719, that's also their area code. Well, what do I do for North? We didn't have 970 in our plan at the time, so we used 721, just the next number up. So that's kind of how you can remember it. And when we did the local, I said, well, let's use 722. So again, it's on the web page. So when you go to the web page, you can say on the 721 talk group, we have a little map showing the approximate coverage. And you can see on here this curved dog leg red line. That's I-70. And here's I-76 going up diagonally. So it's a lot of coverage. And once we add the repeater that we're trying to do up near Sterling or towards Julesburg, we will have all of Aries Region 3. Gizmo, do you agree with this? You look bored, Gizmo. Okay, there's Gizmo. So we'll have most of R3 Aries covered. So here are the repeaters. So if you're going to, you get a new radio that's brand new and there's not a code plug out there and you got to roll it yourself, you're going to look and say, well, I'm nearest to the Horsetooth Mountain repeater. So I'm going to set my radio to 446 750. I'm going to go to color code 7 in it. So that's the color code we're using up there. But you notice Fort Collins, CSU, right above it is color code 8. So there was another repeater, I think, on 446 7625, probably 200 miles away with the same color code. So we didn't want to confuse them. So we gave it a new one. You're going to use time slot number 2, and you're going to use talk group 721. That's what you have to put in your radio. Now, to Dennis's question, there's 2 channels. Horsetooth in the second time slot, or time slot number 1, carries the talk group 700 Rocky Mountain talk group. So you would put a second entry in your radio that says Horsetooth, Rocky Mountain. You would use talk group 700 time slot 1. And now you've got the 2 channels on Horsetooth. Does that require you to put the Akron repeater in your radio? No. Do you have to get into Akron to be able to talk to somebody there? No. You can go in on Horsetooth on 721 and it'll come out on Akron. And I don't know if this will, but so I put them in mine. It says this happens to be Thoradin on Rocky Mountain, and in the next channel I've got Thoradin on the Central and on my radio here. So not that hard to do, but there's a lot of click boxes. And Mark Skelton, who's on the call here, just to make sure that I'm not the only one talking, you can come off mute. You've put in a lot of work on the Kenwood code plug. Have you fat fingered anything and had a whole bunch of things wrong in there? Have you been challenged, Mark? Come on, I know you're there somewhere. Don't make me be the only one talking. Where are you? Are you still? I can't tell if he's fallen asleep or walked away. I'm scrolling through. Okay. He's not going to talk. He may have dropped off the call.
He went to Starbucks.
And he didn't get me one? Oh, the humanity. So, okay. So that's that talk group. And why is my thing? Okay.
Hey, Dave?
Doug, yes.
Yeah, this is Mark. I'm sorry, I cannot find a way to send a text or an IM, so I'm going to speak. But I have a question. Can you
Perfect.
go back to that one slide?
Oh, which slide? I'm on.
The one you just, number 17?
17, yes.
No, that wasn't it. The one that was showing the Northern Talk group. There, that one.
Yes.
When I'm in Denver, which repeater do I want to select to talk up to Northern Colorado to, say, Eric up here in Loveland?
So what you would do is simply on either, there's two ways. The first, least complicated, is you put all of these in your radio like I do. And when you go down to Denver, you're going to select the Boulder repeater. We're trying to give them kind of geographic names rather than site names, but the Boulder repeater is between Boulder and Golden. It's up on El Dorado Mountain, and it has very good coverage to the south. So you would select the Boulder repeater, and then when you use Talk Group 721, you will be heard on Akron, Boulder, Cheyenne, and 3 repeaters in Fort Collins right now.
I was expecting to see a Denver area repeater. Thank you.
Well, the Boulder is a Denver area, but it's not quite as prominent as like Thoradin and Squaw. Now, if you're going to go, so that's the 721, the regional. What we did is we kind of said, what's the region for this? And we said it's Denver, Boulder, and points north. So we overlap Denver with enough coverage that you can get into 721 from down in Denver. But if all else fails, move your traffic over to the Rocky Wide on 700, and now you can go in on any one of, I don't know how many are, I even lose track, 24 repeaters, and you'll get back there. But just keep in mind, you're utilizing 24 some repeaters for a conversation from Denver to Fort Collins.
Got it.
So if you can get into the smaller coverage, great. And this is how we're doing it. Do you need to know about IP Site Connect? Not really. I only threw this in here because the repeaters that we use, and generally most of the clubs that are on Brandmeister are using Motorola repeaters. There are some that are on Hytera and they have their own protocols and ways to link those in. But IP Site Connect is a way that we link our repeaters together. It is a Motorola protocol and a trade name, so it's only with those repeaters. But we have this thing called a C-Bridge, which is the bridging hardware in the middle box. And then we have these repeaters that have a master and a peer. And the northern network is actually an IP Site Connect to us. The central network is another IP Site Connect. The southern is another. And we're bringing all these together such that if we lose our bridge, the system will still operate and connect. It just won't go between regions anymore. So it's a fail soft kind of system. When we have a failure, it fails slowly. The C bridge, and you'll probably never have a need to look at one of these, and probably only about 3 of us on the call has ever looked at one of these. I don't know if Rick is still on the call. I saw his call sign up here earlier, but he has one of these for the Northern Colorado DMR group. We've got one at RM Ham. There's one of these up in Wyoming. And I think these are the only C bridges in our area, but there may be another, but I don't know about it. This is a way that we bring all these things together. This was actually a screen capture that I did as I was putting the final touches on this last night. This was me transmitting. If you're into microfiche, you can read. That was me transmitting on talk group 700. Last night, I was coming in through the Thornton repeater, and you can see the little green up here. That means that's the receiver that was receiving it, and everything in red is where the signal is going back out to. So I was in on Thornton, and it was going out on Fort Morgan, El Dorado, Horsetooth, Akron, Buckhorn, Cheyenne, Squaw, Breckenridge, Leadville, Vale, Almagre, Methodist Mountain, Farmington, New Mexico, Pajarito, and Sandia, which is in Albuquerque. It's going out on all these repeaters. They're all in there. You'll see some that are yellow. Just ignore that. That means basically they're either offline or the thing was a little unhappy about it. But so you can ignore the yellow highlight. But this is the bridge, and that we're telling it how to put all this together. So,
a question on the chat.
Yeah. So Eric asks, if you understand correctly, you could create a small network using only IP site connect. Eric, you understand correctly. And that is the most simple, least complicated. If you have 3 repeaters and you always want them to act together in simultaneous calls, that's that's the most simple and most reliable way. If you have good connectivity between them, good IP, they'll just all work the same. They will be like the Radio City Music Hall Rockettes. They all kick together. Can you control what's on some of the time slots on one versus the other without the bridge? No. They all have to be identical. But it's a great way to get a simple network going. If you want to mix and match and engineer your networks for capacity and coverage, you're going to need an advanced tool like a C-Bridge or a Smart PTT or any of these external third-party solutions that cost anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000. Or if you get really fancy, tier 3 and trunking, and that's typically $10,000 to $20,000 per site for the controllers. It's very expensive. That's the reason we haven't gone to it.
Thank you.
And let's see, when you're done, I'd like to get your slides to post. Okay. So one of the things that I thought would be, I think a bunch of people are kind of saying, what happens when I push the radio? So in the first example here, a user keys their radio and says, I want to make a call. Let me go to something that's a little more, a little less used, and I'll go to the North Talk group. So I decide, okay, I want to say something. This is K2AD. You heard me, well, you should have seen push the mic. You'll hear a little beep. I say something, and then I release. K2AD for a demo. K2AD clear. Release. When I push the button, my radio sent to the repeater. This is me. I want to use talk group 721. I'm on color code 7. I'm on time slot 2, I think it is. I want to make a call. The repeater figured out, is that valid or not? And when it said yes, it sneezed and it said, go ahead. That was the pop you heard. If I'm not able to get into it for some reason, or it doesn't respond. Okay, here's a good one. I'll switch to Almagre, Colorado Springs, which I'm not going to get into on a handheld. Says, nope. That's a denied. You're not in range. So the repeater tells me, I go in PTT, the repeater starts responding, and I put here a little while later, you decide I'm done talking, and I say this with love and respect in my heart, guys. Some of you, it's a really lot later. Some people on here are long-winded, myself included. Often, I release the PTT, the repeater says, hey, everybody, he's done talking. And you all then say, hallelujah. Well, what if this is multiple repeaters and an IP site connect? The exact same things happen, except I make my request, the repeater hears it, and then the repeater says, hey, go ahead. Maybe this in the middle is Horsetooth and this one here is Boulder. Horsetooth says, hey, Boulder, Doug wants to talk. I got a call. You carry it down there. This is on the IP site connect. My radio starts talking. The repeater and the two repeaters start going. They both start repeating. A whole lot later, we unkey. All of the repeaters release. And the call's complete and ready for somebody else. So let me just see where I am on my charts here.
Doug, I've got one on comment/question.
Yes.
One thing that threw me with one of my radios here when I first tried to transmit on this thing is that the okay to start speaking there after you hit PTT comes up as red, which usually means stop, but on the radio it means you're good, go ahead.
Means you're transmitting.
And it's the tone that you're listening more for.
Okay.
If you get the red light, you're okay to talk. If you get some angry sounding tone, don't talk because nobody will hear you.
Okay, so like in mine, I guess mine's a red light that's kind of hard to see. This is K2AD testing. Yeah, and I get a tone and K2AD is clear. And then I got a green light that says the repeater's transmitting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And this should go out soon. There we go. We have a hang time on the DMRs, just like the analog repeater, even though we're not hearing anything. The radio is hearing the repeater, and some radios have advanced features that say, hey, go and find the strongest repeater and automatically move me over there, such that as I start driving on my handheld up near Cheyenne, I'm going to go through the Cheyenne repeater. The radio says, oh, he's moved over to Buckhorn, moves me over there, moves me down to Horsetooth, maybe moves me to Boulder. I never had to change. So we have some stuff in there, but yes, what the radio says to you may differ based upon the technology of the radio and the manufacturer. So you've just got to figure that out. And so does that kind of address what you were saying? Okay. Okay, I guess only two more, trying to leave some time for questions here. So just some closing thoughts for you. Airtime on a repeater and it's a resource. They're expensive. We have limited sites. What's the biggest cost of a repeater these days? I'm going to say the site lease. That can be $200-300 a month per transmitter, per repeater. Well, if I've got a DMR, I can put two conversations on one $300 a month lease. A repeater like the 115, that's $300 for one conversation, if that's the price you're paying. That's why James and the team worked so hard to get us a good lease on Horsetooth. A lot of people say that some of our DMR repeaters are too quiet. I'm not sure that's bad. Not sure it's good. It's just, you know, we kind of value having some repeaters that are there and available for Aries and Oxcom as a primary function, and there's high availability. We have other repeaters that have high conversation. Pick the one you like. You know, as I heard an old George Carlin, your radio has a knob that you can change the channel. If you don't like what you're hearing on one, change the channel. Vote with your feet or vote with your fingers. TDMA and DMR radios, it's a little bit of a sensitive protocol. A lot of the inexpensive radios are just that, inexpensive, and their performance is not so hot. Others, you get a lot of value for that money, and they work really well. You've just got to experiment and ask people, what have you found that works really well? My biggest beef on some of these radios are a DMR radio has a microphone that goes into a codec. I didn't bother to get into codecs, but it's an AMBE +2 vocoder, voice encoder, that takes your analog signal and sends it digitally through the radio and then recreates it back to analog. It's somebody once made the analogy when I was a young engineer in mobile radio design. He says, you take a potato and that's your voice, and you take a Ginsu knife and you slice it up really, really thin slices, send those slices through the radio, and then you put them back together and you've got a potato. But there's a little bit of a gap where you sliced it. You lost a little bit of the potato, but it generally looks like a potato that you had. And that's kind of how the vocoder works. Well, some of these import radios, they haven't put as much engineering into making sure that the mic gain to the deviation that we had in analog is set properly, such that when you speak through the radio, the right volume comes out the other end. They use their radios that they've turned the volume up and it sounds fine, but then I go to another radio where I'm at normal volume and you're half as loud or you're way compressed. I know DDZ and Jim ETE have dealt with this with line audio. Am I compressing the hell out of the thing, or am I sitting down with the VU meter barely moving? That's a big issue on DMR. And it's just something that you're going to have to work with your radio and maybe figure out how to turn up or turn down your microphone gain so that you have the right levels through there. The other thing on some radios, their time slot management is not always, their time management is not always efficient. They're a little sloppy and they tend to jitter a little bit, and they tend to get over slightly into the next time slot. With just a little piece, they just overhang a little bit, and the net of that is, if we're using both time slots on the repeater actively at one time, you're out of the 30 milliseconds, you may be jamming your friend for 2 to 3 milliseconds. And we can probably tolerate that. We just see a little bit higher frame error rate, bit error rate. And maybe your audio is a little bubbly, or, you know, it sounds like you've been sipping on the champagne and you're a little tipsy, but, you know, just find a radio that's pretty good and you'll be okay. There are a couple of radios that are tier 1 out there that are very cheap, and people have shown up with them, programming them as a tier 2 radio, and they show up on our repeater network, and we go, you can't use that on our repeater. And they're like, well, why not? I spent $20 on this Bofang on Amazon. The problem is that radio is putting your conversation in both time slots. And when you're accessing the repeater, you're using both time slots, and you've essentially taken the network we've built and halved it. So you can't use those. Sorry, guys. You've probably wasted more money on bad sushi. So throw that radio away or use it on simplex where you're the only ones. And I said, DMR is fun and we have to have one COVID joke. Yes, it's social. It's being social with physical distancing. So we have been running a little long, but I tried to move quickly through this, but the meeting ran a little bit long, frankly. Any thoughts, questions, challenges that you've been facing that you want to do? Talk about. I heard somebody come off mute. Have I put you all to sleep? Okay. Well, oops, let's see. Mark Sheets says, my DMR software has contact column. What is that? I'm not totally sure because I don't know what radio you're using, but my guess is contact can be in DMR radios is one of two things. Typically, it's mapping of the ID to a name, but it can also be the talk group number and the talk group that you're using, or a private call, which I didn't touch on. Maybe I should. So it really depends on the manufacturer. It also could be a combination of both. So you have to tell. So there's a thing called private calls, and the way those work is if Eric made a noise and it brought him up on my screen so I can see him. I want to talk to Eric, but I certainly can't encrypt or cipher my signal so that no one can hear it. But I can kind of legally obscure it by, I'm going to send a message in. Okay, Mark, I see where you're doing. I want to send a message to Eric, and I just kind of want some security through obscurity. I can say that my contact or this group is really a call to N6RFI, and I would put his radio number in there. And when I key my radio, I'm still going to be on the channel. I'm going to be on the time slot. Anybody with a radio that it's actually called that has promiscuous mode, it allows you to go and listen to anything. It'll just tell you, hey, there's a transmission and this is what it is. Then Eric will hear it, you'll hear it, and other people that aren't in promiscuous mode won't hear it. But the bad part of that is, okay, that lets me set up a virtual private channel between me and Eric. But while we're doing that, no one else can use the repeater and the resource. And you're not going to necessarily know we're doing it. So we don't prohibit it, but we discourage it for major use. But if I need to just send Eric a little note that, hey, our repeater that we're working on up in Breckenridge is broken, can you look at it? And I don't want the whole world to know. I might do a very brief transmission or a text message, use that resource for a few seconds, and he gets it, I get it, and everybody doesn't worry about, is the repeater broken? So that's that. I see here on the text, on the chat, Rocky Mountain Code Plug has Rocky or Central. So what that is that's saying, when you're receiving a call, am I listening for a talk group, a private call, or a different kind of call? That's basically telling it what kind of call you're receiving. So we have to tell in the code plug which talk group I'm transmitting on, and then which talk groups do I want to listen on. And this is where it gets a little more complicated, because there's a lot of things, but that's the simple answer. So let's see. Code plug, can you do a presentation on Pi-Star hotspots? I don't have one, but Joe, why don't you put on the list of a request? There's a lot of interest in Pi-Star hotspots.
Look 2 spots down.
I'm sorry?
Look 2 comments down.
Okay. Darren says we'll put that on the presentation list and find somebody willing to talk. Greg asks if there's a radio causing problems, such as taking up 2 time slots, can the system operator block or blacklist that radio? Not completely, because that radio, unlike a public safety radio where the agency has control over the programming, we do not. But what we can do is block that identifier in our bridge, our connection bridge, to say you can't go anywhere else, but we can lock it down to one local repeater, and then we can try to get a hold of that person and do it. Unfortunately, it's just kind of like a jammer in an analog radio. When they're controlling the programming, they can put anything they want in there, and there's only some limits to what we can do. But we can talk about them and say bad things behind their back. We can take their birthday away and make them wash the dishes in the local restaurant. Let's see. PyStar presentation, cool. Gotta go get that presentation. We'll see you, Dennis. Mark says, okay, that parameter was missing the required piece of DMR. Well, it was in there, but, and Doug says, can you unshare? You mean stop sharing the presentation? Yeah, I guess we could do that since we're not really going by slides. That's a good point. Where's my button to unshare? I've lost it.
Top of the screen, top center.
Yeah, but I'm not getting that anymore. Maybe it's because my window. Why am I not? Oh, there. It moved over to my other screen, and it was a little square box. Okay, that's a good comment. Thank you for that. So I guess we were saying we missed that parameter. That's where this thing gets to be a little complicated, and I kind of implied. So let's just do a very brief folly until, and if people are, I guess Joe's running this meeting, but Joe, shall we essentially say the meeting's over, but if people want to keep chatting, we can talk on here for a little bit. Is that valid for you? And I'm not hearing a no. I'm not hearing Darren saying. So
that's okay. That's okay. I mean, we can keep it on. And by the way, the PyStar hotspot, I will handle that. I'm the one that handles that stuff. So yeah, if anybody wants to go, the meeting is basically over. I do apologize for running late on the business meeting, but I kind of felt we needed to talk about those 2 points. So I thank you very much.
Okay, so if somebody drops off, I won't feel offended, but let's talk briefly about some of these other things that we said. So PyStars, hotspots, I don't run them, but they typically will go into the Brandmeister network. You can set these things up to be multiple protocols. And thank you, Tim. And thank you, Eric. So the thing about these is we do have a little bit of communication or bridging between our Horsetooth, Buckhorn, CSU repeaters and Brandmeister. It's just not heavily advertised because we're trying to kind of figure out how to make it work really well. But we do have a bridge that we take the 721 Northern Talk Group and we bridge that over and put it out on Brandmeister. So if you do have a hotspot, and I'd have to look up which repeater it is. Let me grab my, it should be on the website, but I believe, well, I guess I'm always wrong when I suddenly grab it, but I think it's probably going to be on Brandmeister talk group number 310813. 310813. But look it up on the website, and it's just hard for me to do all of that while I'm also talking here, but we do have on our bridge, and well, I could share it, but we have a thing called the DMR link, and that's one more server in parallel with our C-Bridge server that actually bridges out and goes to DMR. There's also some functions in there that we can take an NXDN, a P25, a D-star signal, and convert it over into DMR and send it over to a talk group on DMR. That portion is not working well in the framing and the packetization. We have to literally demodulate it and remodulate it. We're not transcoding it yet. And that's not a great way. So the audio quality degrades a little bit. But if we take a DMR signal from Brandmeister and simply bridge it over to another system, that works really well. So you could put your hotspot on the 721 network. We also have one to 720 Denver, and I believe that one is 310801. And I think there is down to the South network 310825 maybe, but you can look these up on Brandmeister and on the ARM-HAM webpage and do that. So we're doing that for the 3 regional networks. We're not currently doing that for the wide network just because we didn't want to put that traffic over there and get 2 people in California on a hotspot, in New York on a hotspot, decide they're going to come together on the Rocky Mountain wide and tie up all those repeaters with traffic. So, but if we're doing something for Aries, we can experiment with taking a hotspot, connecting it into the CSU local, which I don't think we have mapped. If we want to do that, James, we could, or bringing it up to 721. Just keep in mind, you're using the internet for that portion of the call. So if the internet's busy like it is during isolation, you get the quality of service that you get, whereas we've put ham microwave between all of our sites such that if the internet is busy, we still keep running. The other thing, like a hotspot, can go on to varying modes. Our 2 clubs are working on a repeater for the Buckhorn site that will be mixed mode or multi-mode. We don't quite yet, we've got the technology, we don't quite know how to operate it and which modes are we going to allow, which modes are we not. I'm going to leave that, I'm just providing the equipment. I'm going to leave that up to our clubs to say, this is where we want to lock it down or we want to leave it dynamic. We could hook it into Brandmeister, but I don't see a real need for that because Northern Colorado DMR does a good job of providing Brandmeister access. So let's do something different. Let's do something that's experimental. We still have Brandmeister. We have our dedicated static network, purpose-built, and we've got an experimental. So James and I and Mark Skelton will probably be, while dealing with physical distancing, putting that equipment up on the mountain. I'd like to see it up there in the next month or so. Now that the weather's nice, we'll get it up there and put it in. So that's a way you could connect your hotspot to a repeater and hear some activity and go with that. And I think we've kind of run out of questions. Anything else that we want to talk about?
No, thanks, Doug. I appreciate your time.
Somewhat off topic, if you want to.
Sure.
I know that for a while there, we were talking about getting a link we could turn on and off to the 275.
From DMR.
DMR, yeah.
So what we need to do for that is finish our development work of that DMR bridge. And well, there's 2 ways we can do it. One is using the DMR bridge, and that is the more complicated. And by the way, Darren, I see you're getting a hull breach, if you can see in your video there.
That is sun shining on my background here.
On your green screen. But when you had the, I forget the name of this. Was it the Odyssey on 2001? The name of the ship. You had a hull breach behind you at one point. Yeah. You see, you got a hull breach there.
Okay. Let me see. I've got another one. Here we go. How about this?
There you go. Okay, you've got the holodeck.
Holodeck with a glitch in there.
Wasn't that episode 237 where Captain Picard became the? No, never mind. So we could do that through the DMR bridge, and we could. But we're going to have to take the DMR signal and demodulate it either in software or with software and hardware with a DVSI chip, and then re-encode it as analog and send it out to the All-Star network and put it out on 275. And we can do that, but it just doesn't sound very good because the short of the story is the guys used some reverse engineering software. They went around the licensing of the DVSI chip, and it doesn't sound very good. We can do better by buying a licensed DVSI chip, which is, I don't know, 20, 25 bucks. Again, I've spent more money on bad sushi. So I've wasted more money on bad sushi.
That's the definition of sushi. Sorry.
No, I like sushi.
I tend to agree.
I like sushi. But what we can do is get a chip and demodulate it and send it over and redo it. The real way to do it would be to come up with a transcoder that takes it digitally, takes the vocoder information out and puts it into a D-Star frame, and then we ship it off to a D-Star repeater. But that's a lot of work, and I'm sure somebody will do that software someday, but it hasn't happened yet. So the other way we could do this,
licensing implications there too for the vocoders.
There may be, but let's not get into that one because we'll spend more time talking about this one than the bylaws change. So the other way we could do this is if we add one more task to James Isaacs. He's still on here, or at least he's on with audio. In his copious amounts of spare time, we could build a all-star node, maybe not using an RTCM, but using a Raspberry. If somebody's out there and has the time and wherewithal, take a Raspberry Pi to a URIX or a repeater builder RIM and hook that up to an inexpensive DMR radio, program it to the talk group, and whenever we hear that signal come back on the DMR radio, it puts it into All-Star and vice versa. And we just program it for a half duplex link rather than a full duplex radio. And then we turn that node on and off, just like we do with 275 and 750. They're two different node numbers. We could mix in that third and do it that way, but it's less dynamic.
Cheap DMR radio, is that something we could hook up to Pi-Star and not have to go through a radio to pick that up?
Well, you can do it through the Pi, but then you've got to use our DMR bridge, DMR link, which does generally work for DMR to DMR, but you've got the vocoding challenges. And the other thing is our current DMR link is a server that is physically distributed from our C bridge. That was only done because the guy developing the bridge was doing it over the winter, and he didn't want to haul it up to the mountain, and we had a microwave connection between us. So it works fairly well for short, a limited bandwidth communication. But if we fired up, 12 parallel paths on this thing. We're going to choke out the server because it's a very small server, powered server, and the microwave link. So what we're working on is a larger server co-located at the site with the C bridge, such that there's a 100 megabit or a gigabit Ethernet between them, and we've got all the power in the world. So that was a very long way of saying that is something that we're developing. That's currently a project in the RM Ham world, but RM Ham and NCARC, we've said we're sister groups. If you want to be involved and you want to play with that, we will support that. If NCARC says, we'd really like to try our own this other way, great, let's do it. Let's put it on the network and we'll all help each other. You know, we don't have to always do one thing. We could do multiple solutions and learn. And like we're doing up at Rattlesnake, we're putting in multiple things and working together. So yeah, let's do it. If somebody wants to build that link,
I am interested in
we'll give you the
playing
guidance
around with that, but I am woefully inexperienced in the world of DMR.
So Doug, I have a
There's James.
VM running here with DV switch and a software-based vocoder that we could experiment with most immediately. I've been told the quality of that is not great, but that's up and running, and just all I need is a port on the C bridge. I didn't even think about your other option. I could definitely hang a URIX off of a 4550 I have here and try that. I've got that sitting here at the house too. So if anybody else is interested in experimenting with that stuff, I have most of it built already, and we just need Doug, if you get me I don't need a port on anything for the URIX thing, but the DV switch thing, I just need a single port into the bridge.
So I believe the DV switch may be the same code load. I'm looking over at my C bridge here screen. Let me switch over to the C bridge. And now, okay, I'm not looking away from you guys. We have it listed as DMR link, but it may be the very same software, James. And we have still adequate ports on the bridge. We've got 20 open ports that we can, or IP site connects, we can still run. So we could put the DMR link 1 and DMR link 2 south and north, and we can experiment away. So
okay, I talked to Jeff about this in detail actually only about a week and a half ago, and got all of his notes on what they've found is good and bad. So I'll work with you maybe and get something set up just for us to start testing with, and then if there are members that want to jump in and help, we'll get a little group together.
Yeah, I would love to be able to do that. I would love to be able to, using a Motorola radio to a URIX to a Pi, or one of our it could even be up at the site and you don't even need an extra Pi. It's just an interface to one of our existing nodes. Would be a great thing, but that's difficult to change the channel, change the talk group. I would love to have the dynamic one where we can program it in and say, this thing needs to go right now to 115 and it's done. This needs to go, we need to connect some of our repeaters over to the connection because we've got a 4x4 groups that need to talk to each other across these repeaters. Don't want to get too complicated, but I want to be adaptive so that when Aries says we need to do this, we can do it. When our clubs say we want to do it, we can do it. So, but let's experiment, let's learn. This would also be a great thing for us to connect into that new Buckhorn mixed mode. That's a great place to experiment because we've left our, what I'll call primary on-air systems, our static systems alone, and we have a dynamic one that we can experiment with. Think of it as a toy repeater.
Hey guys, I got to go. Take care. Thanks, Doug, for everything. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's 11:38 and I've got a CCARC electronic meeting at 1, so maybe I'll actually poke my head up and see if I see
Sunset?
this green and bright things and fresh air outside that I know nothing about today.
I have a
Doug, if you want some more exposure to those green things, I need my lawn mowed.
So do I.
I have a quick question before everybody
Yes,
goes.
Bill.
That I have with D-Star listening to the Parker Radio Club, and I've looked this stuff up on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
They have multi-protocol stuff that is amazing. They get into they accept input and output on FM repeaters that gets translated into all of the modes through Pi-Star. And I've just wondered if you guys have had any contact with them. So they have, I think, a lot to offer potentially.
Do you want the long answer or the short answer?
Short.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's a great group. I live down here in Southwest Weld in Firestone, so I'm not really close to Parker, but my business is located down near Centennial Airport in the Denver Tech Center. So right next door to Parker, one of the guys that works for me is on their tech committee at the Parker Radio Association. I regularly talk to Dan Grady down there. They are doing a lot of good experiments with D-Star, with Fusion. I'm not a big Fusion fan, but just because I don't think I can handle one more protocol in my life. But they're doing some DMR. And so Dirk, who's on their tech committee, as I say, he works for me. He showed me when I was down in the office the other day. I don't go there on a regular basis just with all this isolation. But he said, hey, I've got there's a single card plug-in board for the Motorola repeater that it's an MMDVM. It does multi-mode. It'll do all the protocols. It's a single board that plugs right into the card cage. And he says, I got one and I love it. We're going to probably use it at Parker. And I said, okay, how much? And it was like $150. Again, I've spent more money on bad sushi. No comments, Darren. So I said, well, can you get me one? So he wrote the guy and they had 3 left. So I bought 2. One of those is going to go up on Buckhorn. Another one I'm thinking of putting in one of the QRV vans like we used at WWV, and we use them for the nets occasionally. So we'll have a repeater that can be adaptive to go to the modes. And we're talking with Parker. I've suggested with Parker, let's interoperate your multi-mode with ours up on Buckhorn and create a second experimental network and let's play. Let's have some fun. And they're thinking about it. The CRA is talking about doing a similar identical repeater on, what's the name of that one? El Dorado Mountain. And we're looking at potentially putting another one identical to it at the West Creek site. So now we would have a Douglas County, a Parker-based, a Boulder, Denver Boulder, and a Fort Collins experimental network that we can kind of try all these modes and connect into our multi-mode bridges and DMR links and not break anything that we've built to be available for Aries and Oxcom. So.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of it.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So, well, good to see everybody. I guess we're down to, I see Eric, Ted, Bill, Darren, and DDZ, David. Good to see everybody. Oh, Steve, and we got Mark here. So,
thanks, Doug. It's been really informative. Really good presentation.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to see everybody. I guess real quick for you, Greg, did they mention to you what I'm trying to do with the voter hotel up at Rattlesnake?
They did. I'm on speaker now. Am I getting any kind of nasty feedback or anything?
Oh, you sound great. You sound great.
Yeah, they did, and that sounds fantastic.
Okay.
One thing I'm wondering is for one of those spots, especially if we're going to have a distributed, or you're going to have like a 2-meter antenna and a distribution amplifier and a 70-centimeter antenna.
That's exactly what we were thinking. With a reasonable amount of gain, because it's such a low noise site.
Right.
We'll look out and probably aim the antennas out to the east so that we get north, east, and south from there, primary receive coverage.
It might be nice in that bundle to have probably using an air spy, but have a spectrum monitor receiver on each band. James had said you were using receive modules from I think some Motorola repeaters.
GEs, Master 3s. And yes, I'll either make sure we have 5-port, which is a common, or 8-port splitters. Being that the site is so RF quiet and free of transmitters, I was going to not place receive filters and run open front ends. That way, the only bandwidth limitations are going to be the bandwidth of the antenna.
Okay, yeah.
Now, if we're going to put transmitters up there, we'll need to put filters in, but that means fewer things that you can air spy. It's kind of nice to have a wide open broad. The other possibility is we could just put an air spy on a disc cone, and again, since it's a quiet site, we can listen to anything we want to.
Right. I'm thinking lightning protection there, which is why I wanted to get the airstream or get the air spy downstream from the antenna a bit. And if it's going through a DC grounded style antenna plus a distribution amplifier, I'd be pretty well protected. Now the GE,
I get a really good deal on essentially the version of a polyphaser that's by Times Microwave. And I'll provide, how many do we need? 3, 4, 5 for the site.
Okay.
I'll donate those in. So we will have real lightning protection. And then, so for the receivers, I've been going, we accumulated a number of GE Master 3s for Colorado Connection. And I think I donated some to CSU, but we're running out of power amplifiers because they tend to blow up the power amps easily on those. So I've got enough to keep the guys that are using them for repeaters on the air. And then I looked and I said, I have close to 10 receiver shelves, exciter shelves, and they're great front end receivers, decent filters on them. And I don't have power amps. So I thought, why not turn them into 4 VHF and 4 UHF receivers? And you need a voting receiver. All you got to do is provide your voting controller, your RTCM, and plug in. Otherwise, they're going in the landfill.
Are those receivers remote reprogrammable to where you could change the receive frequency over the microwave link?
Sorta, but
not easily.
Well, what we'd have to do is those particular repeater shelves use serial programming. So what we would want to do is have a PC at the site that has multiple serial connections, and we select which one, like through a port server, and then we just remote into turn the PC on, remote into it, do our thing, and then. But Greg, I have so many. I'll just give you a receiver if you want to.
The reason I was asking because one approach to spectrum monitoring would be to stick an air spy or another SDR on the IF of one of your GE receivers and look at the IF. But if it was a PITA to change,
it is a PITA.
Yeah, it'd be better just to have an air spy directly on an antenna bus.
And I think you'll get better performance with an air spy directly on.
Yeah.
And it'll be easier to use, and
it'll cover bandwidth too.
And if we really want to do adaptive receiver, we can look for something that's a little directly IP controllable and run that way. I just had these, and they make great voting receivers, so I was gonna maybe put one on 115. We could put one on the Connection 7.3. We can put them on 275, 750, and our only cost is the RTCM. But they're big, so I'm going to put 2 relay racks up in that building, or the shelter. But James tells me we got plenty of room in there.
Yeah, you haven't been up there yet. Hopefully,
No.
we'll get up there soon. The snow and ice are gone, but there's plenty of room up there.
Yep. And I want to get whether it's dipole arrays or omnis. I want to get those up there and mounted on the cross pipes and cross arms or unistruts. And let's do it. Let's get a really good receiver. We obviously need it on 115, so and we could sure use it on some of the other repeaters.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get Colorado Connection and your guys, since there's been some investment, get you guys seeing some benefit from the site.
Well, and it'll really serve the community so that when we go to 115, we can get in with a handheld. When we go to the Connection for the Aries net, you can get in with a handheld. Same thing on 275, 750. Anywhere you go on a handheld. That's a real benefit to the club and to Aries and the community. So, well, good to see everybody. I guess we're down to just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, 6 of us.
I'm getting hungry. I'm going to go eat.
Yeah, I need to get a little bit of food before CCARC. This is going to be another interesting meeting, I think, because we've got a couple of people trying to push their personal agendas again, and that's not the way that group works. So,
thanks again, Doug. Great talk today.
Thank you, and Dave, good luck with your recording and video. I'll go look and see if I still have that GoPro. I was thinking about it. See you, Mark. I see he's signing out. If I still have that GoPro around, it's one that we flew on a experimental payload, so it's been up to 70,000 feet.
Nice.
And it's just been sitting, so I'd like to have somebody get some good use out of it. But
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I got that info from Mark. I'll get something over to him and see what we could get worked out for that. That'll be fun.
Yeah. So as far as your recording at the meeting, my only pleadings would be keep it simple.
Yeah.
Something simple enough that anybody can operate. And you don't have to haul a truckload of stuff in and out of every meeting. Just, you know how to do it, but keep it simple. Keep it that an idiot like me could run it.
Right. Definitely.
Dave?
See you guys.
This presentation was brought to you by the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club. For more information, visit our website, ncarc.net. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.